Hi, I'm Ben Hawley. I'm from a company called Urban Foresight, which is based out of Newcastle. We specialise in helping councils think about the transition to electric vehicles and plan where their infrastructure and charge points needs to go. This is my first time in Preston. I've been here today talking to taxi drivers and some councillors about their ideas about where the charging point should go. But yeah, this is a broader overview of electrifying transport. So next slide, please. So yes, I can. The three areas that I'm going to talk about are the problem around transport generally and climate change, the solutions that could be linked to that, and then some of the challenges and opportunities, and an example of a city that's doing quite well with it. Yes, you might notice that the graph on the left looks very similar to Chris's, but slightly more jazzed up. So as Chris referred to, a quarter of the pie of all of carbon that goes up into our atmosphere is from transport, and about 75% of that is from cars. So cars are very important for carbon emissions. So how does it work? We fill them up with petrol and diesel, you set fire to it in the engine, and then all of that gas comes out of the exhaust, all those pictures that you see of it going into the atmosphere. That's what we're trying to stop. Little car with the sun, that's just an example of what greenhouse gases do. So when you go to your car on a hot day and it feels really hot inside, that's basically what the planet is doing. You're adding more glass to the ceiling of the Earth, and it's getting a lot hotter. And the idea behind what I do, electrifying it, is that you get rid of that gas coming out of the end of the exhaust pipe. The other thing on the right there is a gas mask. So you might have heard of clean air zones, the Greater Manchester one. The idea about that is more about the health effects. So there's very, very small particles that come out of especially diesel cars that end up in your lungs. So obviously you've got climate change, but equally there's an environmental point to it as well, and health. Yeah, in an imperfect world, you could just throw unlimited money at electrifying everything, electric buses, everyone gets a free bike, but that's not really possible. So part of my job is, where do you spend the money to get the greatest effect? Next slide. Yeah, so this is a pyramid or hierarchy of transport, high emitting carbon at the bottom, low towards the top. And we sort of look through it three lenses. So the first one is avoid. You avoid the transport altogether. We had a bit of a tester of that over lockdown. And that happened, there was a 20% drop in carbon across the UK. That's what happens when you get rid of those journeys. But what you can think about is remote working. Do you promote that a bit more? Doctors example, video calls with doctors, avoiding transport altogether, those kind of ideas. What can you promote in that area? Shifting is where you go from the bottom of the pyramid and you move to a layer further up. So say I take the car to work every day. How do you make it more attractive for me to take a bus or a train? So those are the decisions you make, and the council tries to influence to make you move up the grid. And then improve it is mainly my job, is when you have to take the car and there's no other option, how do you electrify it? With the buses, I work on electrifying buses, same with taxis, etc. But yeah, that's the basic principle. Avoid, shift, improve. Solutions. So as the men sort of demonstrate there, push and pull. There's two ways that you can sort of change people's behavior. You can push them to do something, or you can try and pull them towards a behavior change. So you might have heard of the 2035 ban on petrol and diesel vehicles. That's been in the news a lot recently. So that's an ultimate sort of, you can't buy a car after that. You are forced to do something. Whereas a lighter approach perhaps is installing public charge points and seeing if the market develops and people want to buy EVs themselves. I suppose emotionally inside, think about what works better on you in terms of change. Do you like to be pushed to do something or pull? When I worked on the Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone, for example, that's an example of pushing the public to do something and it not really paying off and a bit of a backlash. So just think about those ideas when you come to your recommendations yourself. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? So this is, for electric vehicles at least, over the last 10 years, it's been this case. Do you provide electric vehicles? Do you provide charge points or electric vehicles first? One of them basically has to come because they draw each other to the other. So electric vehicles, you wouldn't want to buy an electric vehicle if you can't charge it anywhere. Same if it was a diesel car. If there's nowhere to fill it up, you wouldn't buy one. And charging points, organisations don't want to be paying to put them in if they know they're not going to make any money back on it, which is why at the moment you see the government putting a bit of public money into the space to try and kickstart it. You could replace the chicken and the egg with cycling, I think. So cycling would be the chicken and cycling paths could be the egg. The more cycling paths you build, the more of a draw towards cycling there might be. It's that sort of thing. What do you provide first to influence behaviour? Next, please. Just a few challenges and opportunities. There's far more than this, but this is just to touch on a few of them. So a lot of the conversations we had today was actually around equal access to EVs. So I think it's about 1 in 30 people own an EV in the UK at the moment, and they all fit into one basic category. They've all got driveways. They're all fairly old. They're all fairly wealthy, and I think it's about 80% of them are men. So there's a whole market there. It's not very equal, and it's not very distributed across Preston. So how you affect the market over the next 10 years so that everyone gets an EV equitably. Last mile delivery, you might have noticed in the last 3 or so years over lockdown, there's been a lot more online ordering, shopping, Amazon, etc., which has led to a lot more of these small trips, high emitting carbon trips around cities, which has been affecting air quality a lot. So that's just an example of a challenge that needs to be fixed. On-street parking, about 40% of houses in Preston don't have a driveway, and you can't really run cables across the pavement, at least you're not supposed to. So how do you fix that? How do you get that charge point there if no one's willing to put the money into it? Hubs is a sort of an idea of if you co-locate charging infrastructure, scooters, bikes, etc., you might get more usage between the different transport modes and it's better connected. So that's just an idea that people have. It's been explored at the moment. Range anxiety is a big one for why people don't drive EVs. They feel like they're going to run out, break down, etc. So addressing that issue by providing more and more charge points should fix that and help with the transition. And electric scooters. I don't think you've got a rental system in Preston that you have in other cities, but private e-scooters are likely to be allowed in 2026. So that's anyone who's 40 and above can get an electric scooter, whiz around Preston if they wish to. So you might see a behaviour change there. How does that affect the transport network, etc.? How would you promote it? How do you put charging in for that, etc.? Next, please. Yeah, so finally, just an example of a city that is supposed to be world leading, Copenhagen. So they've committed to 2025 to be net zero, no carbon emitted overall from their vehicles. 3 out of 4 trips on foot, bike or public transport. The road infrastructure there is very flat. It's very well maintained. And if you've ever seen pictures of it, it's just full of bikes. And they heavily promote that through the government. All cars operating inside Copenhagen must be electric by 2025. Most of the lorries are sort of biogas, so when you take gas off crops basically and you fill your vans up with it, which is a more environmentally friendly approach. All of their council vehicles are electric. I believe Preston's committed to that by 2030. Green taxis and car sharing is promoted. There's an app for connecting between transport types, so you can find a bus and a train connected under one ticket inside an app. So that's a way of promoting connection and getting further across cities. And then finally, greening spaces. So that picture at the bottom right is, if you imagine in Preston, your terrace streets, just putting plants all over it and getting rid of cars. If you wanted to push people away from cars, that's a method that you can use. It's all about, I suppose, what the city and the residents want and how far you want to push things. So yeah, that's a tour of my brain. Cool.